Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Dre Baldwin with me. Dre is the CEO and founder of Work on Your Game, the author of over 30 books, and has done multiple TEDx talks. And a lot of where he gets his talks from is his experience playing professional basketball overseas. And so, Dre, thanks so much for being on today.
So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great, my man. So
Great.
to start your journey, you're a Philadelphia guy, and I'd
Yes.
love to say that you grew up always playing basketball, but really didn't even start playing basketball until you're about 14 years old. So talk a little bit about, what it was that intrigued you about basketball, or if it was your friends that got you to go out, and how you started playing.
What intrigued me was my failure in other sports. So
Mm.
I'd always played sports, growing up, Phil. So we played all the normal, backyard driveway sports. We didn't have yards. We had driveways, concrete. So two-hand touch football, kickball. Someone had one of those portable basketball courts. We would
Yeah.
dabble in that. So it's not like I never touched the basketball, but I wasn't like basketball wasn't my sport.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be, Deion Sanders, play football and baseball. I never really played football. My family couldn't afford equipment, so I never really played football. And I did play baseball, but I wasn't good at baseball. I didn't really have much talent. I would have been mediocre at best, like a mediocre high school bench player. So and I finally went to basketball around age 14 because where I come from Philadelphia, and in the city, every young man tries his hand at basketball. One reason is because you don't need any equipment. You can just show up. You only need one ball. You have 50 kids. You got a game. Right.
Oh.
So, with every other sport, you need some kind of equipment. Basketball, you need nothing. So, everybody tries basketball. And I finally went over to basketball because I saw baseball wasn't going to be the thing. So, that's when I started really trying to let's see what I can do in basketball. And the good thing about basketball, as opposed to football and even baseball, is that you can practice and get better by yourself. If all you have is a ball and just the discipline, I guess, or dedication or the dream to try to get better, you can, and you don't need anyone's
Yeah.
assistance. With baseball, you still need a bat, glove, you need something. Football, you need other people. Basketball, you need nobody. So that was another thing that was a good thing for me when it came to basketball, because I was growing up in the 90s, right? So there's no Instagram. It's not like I'm looking at my phone and seeing what they're doing and go do it. It wasn't like that. It was,
Yep.
you just try stuff and hope it works. And that's pretty much all I did. I just kept trying stuff out and hoping that it worked. And luckily, over the years, it's not like this is some overnight thing. Over years, it started working, and that's how we got here.
Yeah. So to dive into that, we'd love to
Mhm.
say, hey, 14, you picked up basketball and you just became this phenom and number one player in the country. But
I
it was
wish.
still it was still a journey even from there. So,
Right.
first couple of years, don't probably get the traction that one would have liked to, but by senior year, you're a part of the team and contributing. So talk a little bit about being willing to persevere and stick with it, even though the early years don't probably get you off to as quick of a start as what one would have liked to have seen.
Yeah, so my senior year, my contribution, just to be clear, was I would do this from the bench. I had front row seats to the game the whole season. That was my contribution, was to clap for my teammates who were in the
Yes.
game actually doing something. I didn't do anything. I sat on the bench, but at least I made the roster, so that did help my
Yes.
confidence. So I
Yeah.
will we can say that, and I can at least say all these years I spent on the concrete practicing, at least I got on the team, even though
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to show for it. So your question was, what was your question again?
Just, what helped you or why did you decide to persevere through,
Mm,
those years of not even making it, opposed to just saying, well, clearly this isn't
all
for
right.
me either. Maybe I should move on.
Great question. So I got to say a couple things. Number one, I was stupid enough to keep trying, because
Yes.
any reasonable, logical person would have said this doesn't make any sense. And I'm a very logical individual, but there are some areas of life in which I'm completely illogical, and basketball was one of them. So that's one thing. Another thing is that having two parents growing up that were all about discipline and do your homework and have respect for adults and just be they just wanted to raise good kids. I had one
Yeah.
sister who's a year older than me. She became a college professor, and they just wanted to raise us right. And
Mm.
my parents did a great job, but they were not athletes. Both of my parents are like 5'8", 5'7",
Yeah.
5'8", but they are biological. We did the test and everything. With my parents, my dad likes sports, like he watches and all of that, but he
Yeah.
didn't play, and definitely not basketball. He's only like 5'8", so he's not that kind of athlete. So they were just about go to school, get good grades, graduate from high school, and go to college and get a degree, because neither of
Yeah.
my parents had a college degree.
Yep.
My mom got her degree when I was in college because she put all that on hold to raise her kids.
Ah,
Right. So the discipline, I got that from home, just from, again, homework, do your chores, etc. And I just applied that discipline to basketball because
yeah.
I knew I had the athletic gene. I
Yep.
couldn't have explained that then, but I was, no, I was tall. I could run fast. I could jump high. I had more athletic ability than a lot of the kids, at least on my block. But who
Yeah.
knows what does that matter in the wider world? I didn't know. Right. And the
Yeah.
good thing is we didn't have the internet. So it wasn't that many people to compare myself to. It was just the kids on my block, the kids in the neighborhood, and the kids at school. That's all you know.
Yeah.
Right. So it was actually good that I didn't have the internet because I might have got discouraged. Like if I would have saw what people my age were actually doing compared to what I thought I was doing. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So all of this was actually good that all this happened that way. And for me, I've always been a competitor. Now that one is innate. I've
Mhm.
always been a competitive person, and sports was a great outlet for that competitiveness and just that killer instinct. Just want to go out there and win and defeat. And I mean, it's a masculine thing, but it's also just that competitive drive. And I like to tell people, Phil, that I have the same instincts that some guy who stands on the corner goes in and out of the judicial system has. It's just that I had two parents at home and I learned how to channel that energy into something positive, and it became
Yeah.
sports.
I love
And
that.
that's really where it comes from. So I took that drive to win, and then the home training I had at home, and the fact that I was an athlete, and I combined them all together, and that's why I kept going and kept trying.
Yes. So speaking of keeping going,
Mhm.
once again, at that point, a lot of people could say, "Man, Dre, you accomplished it. You made the team. You know, good for you." And you said, "Well, now that I made the team, I've got some more confidence. Maybe I can try this college thing out." And so you head to one of the Penn State campuses, and you start there for basketball, and then
Yeah.
you can kind of give the rundown, but at some point you're working at CVS simultaneously, and another basketball coach comes and talks to you. So talk a little bit about that progression and why you chose to attend where you did and playing basketball there.
Well, Phil, I got to say, over the last 8 years, I've done about 300 interviews, and you've done more research than anybody I've talked to. So
Thank you.
I could tell that already 5 minutes into this. Yeah, so I go to Penn State Abington, and that was
Yeah.
right outside of Philadelphia. They don't even have dorms, so you live at home, and you drive or take public transportation to campus every day. So that's
Gotcha.
where I played my freshman year, and I just went there not for basketball. I went there just because that was the school, that was the best option for me. I actually got accepted out of high school. I got accepted to go to Morehouse College in Atlanta, which is an HBCU.
Yeah.
And that's like in the black community, it's prestigious. You get to go to Morehouse. You get to be what they call a
Yeah.
Morehouse man, because Morehouse is all male college.
Okay. Yeah.
And funny thing, this is gonna be on video. This is on
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is when I got to tell the story, the recruiter from Morehouse came to our school in Philly, and he said once a week, every student on campus has to wear a suit and tie all around campus all day. And that kind of turned me off the Morehouse because I'm like, man, what do I want to wear a suit for? When am I ever going to need to wear a suit? And now I
Yeah.
wear a suit every day. But I knew, but my thing was I was going to play basketball. So I'm like, basketball
Yeah.
players don't wear suits,
Yeah.
maybe on the plane, but no, in the games, we're in shorts. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh man, I got to wear a suit. But then when he offered me a 50% scholarship, and a lot of people don't notice, he offered me a 50% scholarship, but the other 50% was still too much money. So that's why
Yeah.
I didn't go to Morehouse. So I had got accepted into Penn State because it's an in-state school, right? So it was
Yeah.
relatively cheap. And I had a couple little grants, but nothing crazy. Like my sister got the crazy scholarship. I didn't get that. She was a better student than me. So anyway, I go to Penn State Abington, play that year. Didn't set the world on fire, but I was the most talented player on that campus. This is an extremely small pond,
Yeah.
right? So at that summer, as you said, I'm working at CVS at a
Yeah.
full-time job, not a full-time, part-time job. I've had jobs since I was 15 years of age. Again, my parents, you got
Yeah.
to work. You want anything other than food, clothing, shelter, you pay for it now. So, and I would just go to the campus every day to work out. And again, it's not like I'm living on campus. I'm driving to campus. I'm commuting to campus just to use the gym because this is the first time in my life, Phil. We're talking the summer of 2001 to give everybody a framework here. This is after my freshman year of college. First time in my life I had access to an indoor gym that I could use anytime I wanted. First time.
Yeah.
All that basketball I did before that was on the playground outside. So I'm just going to use the gym. It is a pristine, beautiful gym. That gym in Abington is still one of my favorite gyms to this very day because I spent that whole summer in there working out and nobody else was in the gym. Like all
Yeah.
my teammates, after the season ended in like March, I never saw those guys ever again in person
Yeah.
because they weren't ambitious about basketball. At that
Yep.
level, at the D3 level ish, people play because they can, not because they have some hoop dream. And
Yeah.
again, they were logical and reasonable about basketball. They know they weren't going anywhere. And I should have been like that, but I was, again, dumb enough to think that I might go somewhere. So I
Yeah.
kept working out. And that whole summer, nobody would be in the facility. Nobody. Because there were no ambitious athletes on that campus. So I had the whole gym to myself, spent the whole summer working out. And one day I walked to the cafeteria. And this is where the guy who happened to be a basketball coach approached me. He just started striking up a conversation like, hey, what position do you play? Because I had on the basketball gear, but I wasn't in the gym. So I'm like, why is this guy approaching me? But I guess he just saw my stature and my clothes and figured I played ball. So
Yeah.
he just basically recruited me on the spot. And what's funny is he didn't even know who I was. It's not like he had sussed out that I would be there and he just waited for me to make it seem like a surprise. He really didn't know who I was. And he told me later that the only reason I approached you, Dre, is because you looked like the type of player who I knew I needed for my roster next year. See, he said I knew I needed like an athletic wing type player, and you look like an athletic wing. I could have been the biggest bum on campus. So he has no idea, right? He said I went and did my due diligence after I talked to you. So after I found out who you were, then I told you, and he basically offered me to come to play at Penn State Altoona. And that was the other campus I went to. And then he went and found out who I was. Then he went and called my old coach and all of that stuff. Turns out I could actually play, but he had no idea. Right.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up getting recruited to Penn State Altoona, which at the time was an upgrade from Abington, because at the time Abington was like provisional. You can only play 2 years of sports.
Got it.
At
Okay.
Abington at the time. Now they're full-fledged D3. But back then they were only 2 years, and Altoona was the only campus on the Penn State system, other than the main campus, the one with the football team. That was the only one that was a 4-year athletic school besides State College. Now a bunch of them are, but back then was only those two. So it was basically an upgrade.
Yeah. So with that, once again, we'd love to say this is the part in the story where Dre's career just takes off and all of a sudden, he becomes like the D3 All-American. But what ends up happening is there's maybe a difference of opinion between player and coach, and that leads to separation. So talk just a little bit about that season. You're excited, you're there, it's this new opportunity, but things just don't seemingly align quite right.
Yeah, so just from the context that we had so far in the story, Phil, I hadn't played a lot of organized basketball by this point.
Yeah,
I played a lot of street ball, a lot of pickup ball, and I spent a lot of time practicing by myself. So I didn't really know what it was like to be on a team all season and practice all the time and playing the games. I didn't understand the discipline required for that. And I didn't know there was any discipline required.
Yeah.
Because even at Abington, my freshman year, we practiced, but the practices weren't that hard. And the coach wasn't a full-time coach. He wasn't on campus all day. He had a full-time job. Then he would come to campus and do his stuff. Because again, it's only 2 years and they didn't have any money for athletics then. Now it's different. Now they have a full-time coach. He has an office in the building like you would expect on college. It wasn't like that at Abington. So even though I had poor practice habits my freshman year, I still started and got a lot of minutes because I was clearly the best player on the team. I didn't perform the best, but I was the best. I was the best, most talented player. Let's put it that way. So I get to Altoona, and the players are better. My teammates are better level than the players I played with at Abington, but I was still the most talented player on campus. However, this coach was a little bit more strict. And his thing was, look, if you don't have the right practice habits, you won't get playing time. So for most of that season, I did not start, even though the players playing ahead of me were not better than me. And everybody knew they weren't better than me. And our team wasn't even that good. So this was all a whole just bad situation. So our team was terrible that year. I was in a rotation. I was like 7th or 8th guy, but the guys in front of me were not better than me. And the team sucked. So, and I had a difference of opinion with the coach about that. But he told me, look, you're not showing the right stuff in practice. So I can't, in good faith, put you in the game because that would go against what I'm about. Right. So, which made sense. In the long run, he was correct. And I was wrong. And at the end of that season, he got fired and a new coach comes in. So that was my sophomore year. My team sucked, but I did play, but our team wasn't good. New coach comes in, this guy named Armin Gilliam. He used to play in the NBA. Yeah. He had been a 13-year veteran. And I remember the day that I met him because that summer I stayed on campus to take classes. And I remember I met him because he got hired in the summertime. And when I met him, he kind of looked right through me as if it didn't even matter that I existed, because when new coaches come into college programs, they replace everybody. Like everybody saw Deion Sanders last season. I'm bringing my luggage, right? Yep. And he was replacing the whole team. And that's the way he was looking at me. So I immediately got the message, unstated message that you're looking at the end of your career right here if you don't do something. And I knew I didn't have the leverage to transfer because nobody knew who I was. I had no performance record. So I said, I got to earn my way onto this team. I can't think I have a spot just because I was on the team last year, because the team last year sucked. So why would I have a spot? All right. So that's why the coach got fired. So I came into my junior year knowing that I was pretty much like a walk-on all over again. That's
Yeah.
the way I looked at it. Whereas some of my teammates who didn't have that experience of being kind of looked over by the new coach, they thought they had a spot just because they had been on the team the previous year. So I remember looking at them and thinking they think they already got this because they were on the team. These guys were
Yeah.
seniors.
Yeah.
Yeah, he cut them. He cut these guys. They were seniors. These are guys who were all conference, honorable mention, starters every game, coming into their senior year, and they got cut from the basketball team. He cut them like early in tryouts. And I remember it happening, and I knew that they just didn't know what I knew. And they were
Yep.
cocky about it. I had a reason to be very cautious with this new coach because I saw how he dealt with me when I met him.
Yeah.
So I ended up making the team. And we had a lot of returners, but only 3 of us started off. And 3 of us started off making the team, and he ended up getting rid of all 3 of us before we hadn't even played half the season. All 3 of us were gone. So my last year and a half of college, I was at college, perfectly healthy, one of the best players on campus, but I was not on the basketball team. So that's how my college career ended. Now, I will add one thing, Phil. I did win the intramural championships. So
Let's go.
I got intramurals and scoring and won the championship.
I love it. Now,
Yeah.
now to that story, once again, coming back to the work ethic and your parents encouraging to work, you end up working at Foot Locker, which, that's pretty natural segue for a lot of us basketball folks. It's like, well, I'll go to the place where shoes can be bought and great gear can be purchased.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a strategy, but yeah, it sounds good.
I'll give you some credit here.
Yeah.
Now, with that though, you get invited or you attend a
Yeah.
basketball event so you can kind of show off skills and maybe get some footage that could be used. So talk a little bit about, once again, just like after high school, why keep going, right? Like, hey,
Mhm.
you proved to yourself you could play in college. Like, why the heck keep trying for the next level? But you do. So talk a little about getting that, sending the videos out, and the opportunity that then comes overseas.
Great question. So let's just look at each step in the story. So
Yeah.
when it came to first starting out, like high school years, when I wasn't even making a high school team, I was into sports. I had the sports bug. Let me just
Yeah.
play sports. That's what young men do. Young men, 14 to 18, 14 to 19, you're either playing sports or you're in the streets or standing on the corner somewhere. So you
Right.
need something to do. And our parents, again, I had 2 parents at home, and they weren't going to let me stand on any corners. So
Yep.
go play sports. So
Yep.
that was, or be a really great student. Like my sister was a really great student, so you didn't play sports. It was one or the other. So that was the thing then. That was on my own volition. When it came to college, I just said wherever I go, because it wasn't because of sports, wherever I go, because I'm just a student, I'm just going to try to get on the basketball team. Let's see what happens. So that's how I ended up at Abington, and I got some confidence from being on the team at Abington. I went from barely playing in high school to starting in college. So this is
Yeah.
something. Like a lot of high school athletes don't even play college ball. So I
Right.
had done something. So now I had the confidence. Then I get recruited to go to a new school. So 2 years ago, I was barely making the team. Now I'm getting recruited to go play for somebody.
Yeah.
And I got there and I was like, yo, I'm better than these guys. And these guys had played 4 years of high school ball. So
Mhm.
I was a late bloomer, what they say in sports. Again, I didn't start playing until I was 14. So my talent kind of started showing when I was 18, 19, 20 years of age. Whereas a lot of young men, their talent shows when they're 14, 15 because they've been playing since they were 5. Right. I didn't have that experience. So I was kind of on a slower process in terms of all of life, but I was beating these guys. I was better than these guys. And these are guys, again, who had played 4 years of high school ball. So I knew I was better than them. I just didn't have the experience. So that was in college. Now, by the time I got out of college, now I'm an adult, right? So when I went to that exposure event, the thing you mentioned, I'm 23 years of age. So at this point, if these hoop dreams, if it's not real, by this point you got to get serious, right? And now
Yep.
let's be adults now. All right, you can't keep chasing this thing. It's over. So now I had a reason. Now before it was just all right, this naturally makes sense. Now at this point, 23 doesn't naturally make sense anymore. Now you need more than logic. And this is
Yeah.
what I tell my audience: this you got to bring some emotion into this. And I'm not a very emotional person, but every human has emotions, and you need that emotion as that's the gas. You need
Yeah.
that gas in the tank to go with the logical reason. So I have reasons now. So number one, that coach who kicked me off the team when I was a junior. When I got kicked out off the team, then I looking at my teammates, friends of mine. These are all good guys,
Yeah.
and some of them still my best friends to this day. But I said I'm better than these guys. But for posterity's sake, they all can say, well, my college career went longer and further than Dre's did. And that was factually the truth. By the
Yeah.
time I graduated college, I hadn't even played my senior year, and these guys had played, and I'm 10 times better than them. So I'm like, well, if it ends here, yeah, I know it's over for them. If it's over for me too, then they won. And I can't let that happen. So I had to, first of all, that couldn't happen. That was number one.
Yeah.
Number two, this coach had kicked me off the team. So I had to prove for posterity's sake that he had made a mistake. So I had to go further. There's only one level after college is pros.
That's
so I got
right.
to make it pro. And then the third thing was, even when I came home from college after graduation, my parents said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I'm going to play pro basketball. And that was funny.
Yeah.
And my parents, they saw this whole journey. So they're like, well, do you have a plan? Do you have an offer? Do you have a way to get the job? Because my parents don't know anything about pro basketball, but they understand how to get a job. And pro basketball is a job. So they just asked me the same logical questions you would ask anyone who says they're going to get a certain job.
Yeah.
And I had no information. I had no answers. I had no plan. So they just said, well, this doesn't make sense. My mom was doing most of the talking. She's like, this doesn't make any sense. And she was 100% correct. So at that time, again, I wasn't mad at my parents. I was mad at the situation. Because what they had done was hold a mirror up to me and showed me the truth, which was staring me in the face. Like, you won't have anything going on here, but you're talking about you're going to play pro basketball. It logically makes no sense. Right. So all of that was the gas in the tank.
Yeah.
Now you combine that with the fact that I had some game, and then combine that with, okay, well, I'm gonna work at this job at Foot Locker, and I also worked at a gym called Valley Total Fitness. I get me a membership at LA Fitness. I'll just work out on my off days, play pickup, lift weights, and I got to wait till the summer because all these exposure events happen in the summer. Because that's the off season from pro basketball. So that's when teams go looking for their next employees, the next players. Absolutely. So that whole year after graduated 2004, that whole year I worked out at LA Fitness, and I just kept my eye on the calendar. What exposure event can I go to? So I found that one that I went to. It was $250 entry fee, and I had to pay it in cash because I didn't have a bank account or a credit card. And had to negotiate to get 2 days off from my job just to get the weekend off to go to the event. I left on Friday, had to be back at work on Monday, and it was a Saturday, Sunday event, and I played pretty well there, and that was my chance. That was my shot, and I played pretty well at that event. The scouting report and the footage from that event led to me going and finding an agent, and then the rest happened. So that's how I got in.
So I want to highlight something that you said just in your response there, and that is, finding the wins to give you the confidence, right? I think so many times people feel like it has to be this mountaintop moment compared to everybody, right? But for you, it was just your next mountaintop moment, right? It's not like, oh, well, I scored 100 points in a game, so I knew I was going to be better than other people. It's like, well, no, I'm just better than I used to be, so why not keep going? And I think that's important. And once again, we're talking about in the scope of basketball, but somebody listening right now is sitting here saying like, man, someday if I'm being really honest with myself, I'd like to be the president of the company, but I really have never had any actual thought that I could be the president of a company or that I could start my own company. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe you haven't done some of the same things that LeBron James had done, but you had seen the progress for yourself. And as long as you were making progress, the next, opportunity was just going to present itself. So talk a little bit about that, finding the wins for you, not necessarily making it a win in comparison to somebody else.
Right. And that's another reason why I'm glad, Phil, that we didn't have social media then.
Yeah.
Because if we did, I would have been on it, as everybody would have been. And I would have seen how other people my age were progressing. I would have looked at myself and looked at them and said, okay, what the hell am I doing? But because I didn't have that information, my ignorance actually helped me keep going because I didn't know what I didn't know about what anybody else was doing. I mean, we had the internet, but it was nothing like what we have now, where you could be in everybody's business. Then back then it was just you knew who you knew, and that was it. So for me, those small wins were big for me because I could see the progress. Again, this is the reason why I kept trying to play after high school, because after high school, who would have advised me to try to play college ball? Nobody. But I could see I was making progress, and I didn't have enough information to believe that this little bit of progress, this little light of mine, was too small. I had no reason to believe that because it wasn't enough for me. I didn't see anybody else who was doing it better. I mean, besides on TV, right? Yeah. And so we look at them as unreachable. So for me, it was just those small wins mattered. And then that was up through college. Again, college, once you go to high school and then you are in college is still a sheltered environment. It's like a practice run for being an adult, and you're in that bubble. But then when you get out of college, now it's real life, right? So when my parents, even though I was living in my parents' house, it's still real life, right? And I'm talking to my parents, and they're like, "Well, how are you going to do this?" And I had no plan. Now I'm working at Foot Locker, and I'm taking the bus and the train to go to Foot Locker every day. And I'm like, man, 6 months ago I was at college parties, drinking and taking girls home. Now what am I doing? I'm riding the
Yeah.
bus to go work at Foot Locker. Right? What's happening here? This is real life. Now it's
Yeah.
real. So at that point, you can't just keep telling yourself the dream, oh, well, I'm just good at basketball, I'm going to make it. Because this is where a lot of people's dreams die, when that reality really smacks you in the face, right? And the reality was smacking me in the face. But again, the reason why I kept going, Phil, is because I had that gas. And those stories that I told you, those are, I tell people in my audiences, if those things didn't exist, I would not have been a pro ball player. We wouldn't be here talking.
Yes.
I needed reasons. And
Yeah.
Jim Rohn always said, Tony Robbins' mentor, Jim Rohn, he said, the reason people don't succeed is not because they don't have the resources, because they don't have strong enough reasons. And I
Yes.
had strong enough reasons. Those reasons fueled the talent and the dribbling drills and the shooting and the jumping. So a lot of people who can shoot and jump and dribble. But if they don't have strong enough reasons and they don't have the discipline to put those reasons behind, then it's not going to happen. So that
I
was the key for me.
I love it. Yeah, I had a gentleman named Justin Prince on the podcast, and a question he asked
Mhm.
is, he goes, how long and how far are you willing to go, right? Like, how
That's
long
great.
are you willing to pursue something, and how far out of your comfort zone are you willing to go? Because to your point, there's a lot of people that have maybe talent and skill, but until they're ready to push themselves beyond the boundaries and really pursue something, that is where it's going to end for them.
Right.
So I love that. Now, within that journey, and you get a professional overseas contract, simultaneously you also decide, maybe I should upload one of my workouts to YouTube. So talk a little bit about what spawned that inspiration. I mean, was it, hey, I didn't really have direction, so I'd like to give other people direction? Was it just, hey, there's this YouTube thing, maybe I should check it out? What kind of spawned the idea of starting to upload workouts on YouTube for you?
So Phil, I would love to lie and say I was just trying to help other people out, but that's not the reason why I got on YouTube. So
I'm trying to give you credit. I'm trying to give you credit in so many
no,
examples.
that wouldn't be the truth. So
Yeah.
what happened was that exposure camp that I went to, and I played pretty good. The footage was on this thing called a VHS tape. You remember
Yeah.
those?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So the footage is on a VHS tape. For those people under 30 listening to this, Google it or ask your parents to tell you what that is. So the VHS tape, I knew that if you lose it or drop it, leave it in the water, leave it in the sun, the footage can get destroyed. Now, this footage is the most important footage I own, because it's not only me playing well, I've done that before, but I was playing well against pro level players, not D3 players,
Yeah.
guys who were pros. So I needed that footage to last. So I took the video to an audio visual store, and they got it off the VHS and they stripped it and they put it on a data CD. I don't know how they did that, but they did it.
Yeah.
So I took that data CD and I uploaded that footage to this new website called YouTube that says you can upload as much footage as you want for free. You can just put videos up here for free. I said, wow, that's a great idea. I can store all my footage. I didn't have that much, so I can put all my footage on YouTube. So I put the video on YouTube, and this is the same year that I started playing pro. So this is 2005.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it, because who cares about YouTube in 2005?
Yeah. Right.
I was blogging first, but my blog never caught on like that. I mean, but it was YouTube that actually ended up catching on years later. But I didn't think anything of YouTube. I put the video up there and left it and didn't even check the website for 6 months, because who cares? About 6 months later, I checked the website just to make sure it was still there. And there were people leaving comments on the video asking questions like, yo, where do you play? Or who taught you? Or how often do you practice? Or can you make more video? Can you make videos about dribbling? Can you make videos about dunking? Can you make videos about how to shoot? And when I realized, the light bulb went off in my mind, like, oh, these kids are coming to YouTube to get the information that people like me just had to get lucky to get back in the day. Now they can go to the internet and get this information.
Yeah.
But even though I had that realization, Phil, it's not like I immediately put together a business plan to become an influencer. That didn't happen. Again, I wish I could give myself that credit, but that's not what happened. So for the next 2005 through about 2008, 9, I'm playing basketball. I'm bouncing back between different cities, different countries. I'm traveling. I'm playing. I'm just trying to get this career thing going, because that's my meal ticket is I'm going to play pro basketball. And I'm putting videos on YouTube sporadically. So once every 2-3 months, and once every 6 weeks, whenever I get around to it, I
Yeah.
would record something, just put the video on YouTube. I know it was a thing, but again, who cares? There's no money to be made on YouTube. There's no business model around putting content on the internet at
Yep.
this time, at least not something that was ubiquitous. I mean, there were people making money on the internet even before that, but
Yeah.
it wasn't mainstream. Like the average
Right.
Joe didn't understand it. right? And I didn't understand it. So 2009, I'm unemployed. The phone's not ringing. And my agent's saying, just stay in shape. This is what agents tell anybody who's an
Yeah, right.
athlete. Just agents is telling you, hey, just stay in shape, stay ready. When they call, you're going to have to go in like 3 days. So just keep working out. And it sounds good, but it's very hard when you're in the midst of it.
Right.
When you're in the midst of that, it's October, November. The season is going. You know, everybody who's playing is overseas playing. You're home, and your agent is telling you just stay ready. And you don't know when or if that phone's going to ring. So my phone's not ringing. And I'm telling myself, I'm in my mid to late 20s at this point. It was cute when you were 23, but it's not cute when you're 26, 27.
Yeah.
Right. You're waiting for the phone to ring. You're telling somebody asks, what do you do? Well, I play basketball. Well, why are you here? Are you
Yeah.
supposed to be overseas playing? And I'm not playing. So this is when I said to myself, okay, I got to do something that gives me some control. So I asked myself, how can I combine three things? Basketball, which I already had developed skill at, the internet, as I've always been a kind of a computer/internet geek, and making money. How can I do all three at the same time?
Yeah.
Now, it sounds like a very simple question today when
Yeah.
we're talking about this, because this people go and they do this for a living. They grow up wanting to be an internet person. But in 2009, there was no such thing as an internet person, right?
Yeah.
So that's the answer to that question was, let's just put more resources into this thing you have online. Because I had an audience of ball players that was growing from these videos I'm randomly putting out on YouTube. Also, YouTube gets purchased by Google. Now they start monetizing the videos, and they start sending you these little emails. All right, this video is popular. Click this button and you can monetize the video. So the more it gets viewed, the more money you make. So now I'm making money from putting videos on YouTube. So
Yeah.
now I say, okay, if I can make money off it, I'm gonna put a video up every day. So
Yeah.
that's what I started doing. I'm putting videos on YouTube every day. And I started writing more blogs and articles. Basically, I was just writing about my experiences playing overseas and traveling. And I'm writing, like, I'm posting it to my Facebook page because my friends from college are reading these, and they're entertained by the stories of, look at this
Yeah.
guy, he's traveling the world and playing basketball. So it was a unique unique stories I was sharing. And also people just like reading my writing. And I've always been a writer since even before YouTube. And also I started creating my own products. So
Yeah.
the first product I created, and I got this idea from this author named Tim Ferriss, which most people know.
Yeah.
And Tim Ferriss had this idea of how do you experiment and create a product that you might be able to sell online. I followed his little experiment. I created a product for $4.99. I actually created two of them, Phil. One of them was simple to advanced ball handling, so how to dribble the basketball. And the other one was shooting, how to work on your shooting. And
Yeah.
I made these programs just based off a video that I had already created for YouTube. I just
Yep.
made programs based off it because players who are watching me on YouTube, I got to give this part of the story. They would, one random commentator that probably didn't even have an avatar picture or a name. He just said, Jerry, why don't you just take the workouts that you do and just put them into a program so that everybody, all of us who watch you, we can work out the way you work out. I
Yeah.
said, man, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just finished reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, and he's
Yeah.
talking about how can you basically take, because I remember reading Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad back in
Yep.
the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss took a lot of those principles and he digitized it. He made it for the digital world. All right. How do you hire a person in India to work for you who you never met in person? And how can you basically cut time out of your workday to have the internet and software and other people do things for you so you don't have to do them yourself? Because Tim Ferriss was a life hacker. I mean, lifestyle business. I think we got to give him credit for that, right?
Yeah.
And so I took these ideas from Tim and I said, okay, I'll make that program, but I'm going to charge for it. So I'm thinking, I had to think like an entrepreneur. I'll charge for it. And people said, we'll pay for it. Just can't cost too much. Because I knew who my audience was. 13 to 18-year-old young men who are aspiring basketball players. I knew exactly who my audience was.
Yeah.
So I said $4.99. They have that, right? And then they can
Yeah.
get that from mom, and mom won't ask too many questions, right?
Right.
So I put those programs out and they started selling immediately, Phil. Immediately, those programs started selling. And I remember I made my first sale. I had the BlackBerry phone at the time.
Yeah.
And a little light will blink when you got an email or a text. And I got
Yeah.
the email that said, congratulations, you made a sale, $4.99. And when I made that sale, Phil, I said to myself, I could do this for the rest of my life because I'm not going to be able to jump 39 inches in the air forever. I won't be able to run past and jump over people forever. But taking an idea out of my head and putting a price tag on it and selling it to somebody, I got plenty of ideas. And the
Yes.
internet is not going anywhere. And I have an audience. I could do this forever. So I just went and created more programs. And I said, if the phone doesn't ring again, I'm okay. I can make money doing this. Now, luckily, the phone did ring again, and I kept playing until 2015. I'm sure we'll get to that. But that's when I started creating more products. This is also the time when I'm sure we'll talk about this as well. Self-publishing for books became more accessible for everybody. And I started creating courses, and we go on from there.
Yeah. So yeah, you talked about, posting and posting consistently.
Yeah.
And I forget exactly how many it was, but it's thousands of videos consecutively, is
Yeah.
what you posted. And so, once again, it's a theme in your story, right? Doing the things, even when you don't have immediate gratification from it, trusting that if I do this consistently enough and I view this as a win, it will be a win long term for me in a grand scale. So, talk a little bit about the just sticking with it. Because once again, thousands of videos every single day, consecutively, why you
Mm.
were just continuing to do that and what you were continuing to post there.
Yeah, so the when I started doing the videos every day was around that 2009 time period,
Yeah.
because Google had purchased YouTube, and they put this thing out where you can now be a YouTube partner, which
Yeah.
is, I guess they almost do it to everybody now, but back then it was like you had to like leap over a bar in order to do it. And I remember the first time I applied, they actually rejected me.
Yeah.
I think it's because I had because back when they used to put copyrighted music, and that was a big deal with
Mhm.
YouTube before Google purchased them. But then I said to them, I applied a second time. I said, I'm going to put out videos every day. And they approved me. And I said, all right, I'll just put out videos every day, and let's see
Yeah.
if I have enough ideas. So that was one thing, was just because the monetization option. That's
Yeah.
one reason why I put videos out every day. Another reason was because I worked out every day already. And the other reason was I said, what can I do that everybody else is not doing? I'm always trying to figure out what can I do that doesn't scale, which means other people can't just simply see it and copy it. And that even when people know that I'm doing it, they won't do it. All right, what
Yeah.
can I do that I can do it? It's like an open secret. All right, I'm obviously doing this, and you see exactly what I'm doing, but you still won't do it.
Yep.
And I've always tried to look for that edge, and
Love
that was the edge that I was looking for on YouTube.
I love it. Now,
Mhm.
you hinted at it, you continue to play overseas, and so that's a, revenue stream for you, but at some
Mhm.
point you decide, "Yeah, I'd like to be able to write a book," and so, you write the book, The Overseas Blueprint, which once
Yeah.
again, I'm noticing a theme, "Hey, I've had to learn this one way, maybe I can, educate others and help them, bypass certain things or maybe not have to go through it the exact same way I did." So talk a little bit
Mhm.
about, the first book and just, what the inspiration was behind writing a book.
Sure. So that book, I will take credit and say I did make that because I wanted to pay it forward to the next generation of players. So that one, I did do that on purpose. So
Yes.
that was actually when I first wrote that book, Overseas Blueprint, is actually right here over my shoulder here.
Yeah.
That was a compilation of a bunch of articles that I had already written and published just about basketball overseas. And I was getting a lot of traffic to my website just based on those
Yeah.
articles at the time. And Overseas Blueprint was actually, it wasn't my first book. I think it was book number 5.
Okay.
So my first book was called Buy a Game. That's the only book of mine that's a narrative where I'm just telling my story from when I first started playing up through my college years. But every other book is similar to the Blueprint. It's like a how-to, nonfiction, self-help type of book.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from.
I love it. Now, within your story, at some point post playing overseas, you've been building these businesses, but I think one thing that can be difficult for people is anytime they're closing a chapter in a story that's been so important to them is making
Mm.
sure that their identity is not 100% wrapped up in, well, Dre was this basketball player, right? And now who is Dre? And I'm sure part of you having a business already established was helpful in the transition, but how do you kind of balance that? I think you hear about that a lot in athletics. I think you hear a lot about that a lot in business where people have spent so much time and effort becoming really good at something that that's then a portion or a large portion of their identity.
Yes, great question. So for me, it was the fact that I had such a bumpy road
Mm.
making it in basketball in the first place contributed to my transition being so much easier than it would have been.
Yeah.
And what I tell people, Phil, is that had I had the normal athletic career, normal pro athlete career of play high school, play 4 years of college, and then go straight into the pros and just be employed until you're not employed,
Yeah.
then I never would have started doing all these things that we just been talking about. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
started trying to build a brand on the internet or selling products or any of that stuff because I wouldn't have needed to. If
Yeah.
I'm just steadily employed in basketball, I wouldn't have been thinking about a plan B, C, or D when it came to putting money in my pocket because I already had it. Plan A is
Yep.
working. I need B, C, or D. So
Right.
when plan A got shaky, and that's when I started looking at plan B, C, and D. But the good news is another thing is that even though my parents, as I told you, I've given them credit for the great job they did. My parents were, for the most part, they worked jobs. For the most
Yeah.
part, they were 9 to 5 employees. They would dabble in kind of small business stuff, but they were really 9 to 5ers. And they wanted their kids to go to school, get a degree, get a good job.
Yeah.
That's the plan that people from our parents' generation, that's what they wanted for their kids.
Yep.
Because you got to remember, people grew up who were born in the 60s. You couldn't just start a business for
Right.
nothing. We
Right.
can start a business for zero right now. You start a business right now with no money
Yeah.
from your couch. You couldn't do that in 1980.
Hmm.
So they didn't have that blueprint. They didn't have that idea. So they couldn't have planted that seed in us. But being that my mother's an educator, which I didn't mention, I've always been a big reader.
Yeah.
So I was always into reading books. And this is how I stumbled into, I actually got dragged to a network marketing meeting, not knowing what network marketing was. That's when I got introduced to personal development, which led to the mindset stuff that I ended up talking about. I'm sure we'll get to. And also in that network marketing meeting, another piece I got to give you here. I have a 4-year business degree. All right. And when I went to the network marketing meeting, that 1 hour meeting, the guy on the stage was saying things that none of my college professors ever said in 4 years. So I'm
Yeah.
like, how is that possible? How is this
Yeah.
guy saying things that make perfect sense that none of my college professors are saying? Aren't they supposed to be smarter than this guy? They're the
Yeah.
professors, right? And he was saying completely different things. So that's what put the entrepreneurial seed in my head.
Mm.
So again, when I read Kiyosaki, when I read Napoleon Hill, Rich
Yeah.
Dad Poor Dad, back in, this is like 2002. I'm still in college. So I said I'm going to be an entrepreneur because Kiyosaki was talking about create assets. Don't just go get
Yes.
a job and work. Go create or obtain assets that put money in your pocket so that you are not the only asset you have. Because if you're your only asset, if something happens to you or you die, then your money earning ends. And I
Yes.
thought to myself, it kind of made me have to think twice here, Phil, because what was I about to try to do? Go
Yeah.
be a basketball player where I was the only asset. So I
Yeah.
said, I got to do something other than just play basketball because, and the way he explained it was perfect because a basketball player is no different than a school teacher or somebody working a 9 to 5 job. Because
Yep.
if something happens to you or you stop working or for whatever reason you don't have a job, there's no money. The faucet
Mhm.
turns off. Doesn't matter how much was coming out. When the faucet turns off, you have no money. So I said,
Yes.
okay, I can't just rely on playing basketball. I had that in the back of my head.
Yeah.
I'm still going to play, but I know I had to do something else. So when basketball got quiet, that's when I started putting these ideas. They all started to come together, and that's when I started to do the other things. So answering your question here, what led me to kind of that transition was the fact that it was so shaky
Yeah.
during the whole time. There were times I was signed, unsigned, signed, unsigned. It's going good, it's going bad. So by the time I was done playing in 2015, I'd already been building a brand. I had
Mm.
already been selling products. I'd already been writing books. And the people following me online could see like Dre is not just a dude. He's not just a basketball guy. I am a basketball guy, but they could see this guy's a business guy. Like he's selling products,
Yes.
he's monetizing. Like this guy's, they could see what I was doing. Like he's a business guy. And I've always told people I am not a basketball player. I am a salesperson who happened to sell myself as a basketball player, but I'm not a basketball player. I just happen to be athletic, but I'm an entrepreneur and I've always been an entrepreneur. And I just needed the right vehicle and the right tools to understand it. And which is why my eyes were open. And when that bulletin board posting that led to be network marketing got posted on my college campus, there's a reason why I saw it.
Yeah.
And when I went to that meeting with that guy, it was only 3 students showed up to the meeting. I was one of the 3. And of those 3, I was the only one who actually followed through and looked into what this guy was talking about because I was looking for it.
Yep.
So you want to talk about who knew that was going to happen? All right, that right there. So I
Yeah.
was looking for it. And that's what led me to that. And again, being an entrepreneur and realizing, okay, as a salesperson, even to get myself into pro basketball, I had to sell myself.
Yeah.
I had to sell myself to get in. I had to sell myself over and over again while I was in there. So when it was time for me to stop playing, it was a natural transition to go into business. I mean, I had a nice audience from basketball players, but it was a natural transition to go into business because I knew there's more that I'm going to have to do in life besides just play basketball. Unfortunately, I didn't make enough money that I could just stop and never do anything
Yeah.
else again. Some people wonder about that, and it wasn't that much. I made money, but it wasn't enough that I could not work again. So I needed to do something, but I wanted to do something
Yeah.
because I figured I could do more as an entrepreneur than I did as a basketball player. So all of that is the answer to your question.
Yes. Now, as you're building a platform, you've got the YouTube channel going on, you've got
Mm,
books that are coming out, you play basketball, and then you start getting in the speaking realm and having the opportunity to speak. And you've done multiple TEDx talks. So talk a little bit about, what the you know, backing or the thought process was behind getting into the TEDx space, and talk about, doing, professional speaking, and which you do large scale now,
Mhm.
and some of the messages that you like to deliver there.
Great question. So when it came to TEDx, I got to go back to Tim Ferriss. So I
Yeah.
used to listen to Tim's podcast all the time. And I still listen to his podcast. And back in maybe 2014, actually exactly 2014, I'm listening to his show. He was interviewing this guy named Derek Sivers. You ever heard of Derek Sivers?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so Derek Sivers is an author. He's written a few books and he's done
Yeah.
a couple TEDx talks himself. And Tim's interviews are like 2, 3 hours long.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I listened to the whole interview, and at the end of the interview, because I liked the interview with Derek, and Tim said, "Well, how can people find out more about you?" Normal questions. And Derek says, "Well, people can email me." And Tim says, "Wait a minute, you might not want to say that, right? Because I got so many listeners. If you give your email address, you're gonna get a ton of email." And
Yeah.
Derek said, "No, it's okay. I actually read every single email I get, and I do actually take time to reply. I
Wow.
won't reply immediately because I'm going to get a lot, but I do reply to people's emails." So I said, "Okay, I'm going to email this guy." So I
Yeah.
emailed Derek Sivers. And I tell him who I am. And I was already a fan of Derek. I had actually read a couple of his books. I listened to some of his tests. I knew who he was before he was on Tim's podcast. So
Yeah.
I emailed him, told him who I was, gave him an introduction. And he said, "Man, well, I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the email." And I told him what I was trying to do. Why I emailed
Yeah.
him was I wanted to get into professional speaking.
Mm.
I was just getting out of basketball at this point. And I said, "I'm getting out of pro basketball and I want to get into pro speaking. Can you give me some ideas on what I can do to get started?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I suggest you try to do a TEDx talk in your area." So he said, "Go to the TEDx talk website, put in where you live, and you'll see events in your area, and then just go apply for TEDx talks and see if you can get on the stage." And that's exactly what I did. That's how I got on the TEDx stage. So I just started applying for TEDx talks. And people hear that I've done 4 TEDx talks. People hear
Yeah.
that and they're like impressed, like, "Man, you did 4 TEDx talks." Well, I've applied for about 40 TEDx talks. I've done
Yes.
4. All right. So you don't get everyone that you apply for. I've applied a lot. And I would just do the same application for the same idea until
Yeah.
someone picked it. And then I come up with a new idea. And until someone picked it, and then come up with a new one. So that's how I got on the stage for TEDx.
I
And what was
love
the
it.
rest of the question with professional speaking?
Yeah, and so then,
Yeah.
getting the opportunity in TEDx, but now you're doing more on like the keynote and, large scale stage. So talk a
Mhm.
little bit about, how that came to be, and just maybe one, or I know you've got multiple things to talk about, but maybe one or two, really important lessons that you're able to teach and share with folks.
Sure. So first, I got to tell you how I got into professional speaking, or
Yes.
how I got the plug for professional speaking is the
Yeah.
best way to say it. So I was playing pickup basketball with some guy, maybe 2013, and I said, "I'm about to stop playing basketball, and I want to be a professional speaker next." Or he said, "What are you going to do after basketball?"
Yeah.
I said, "I'm going to try to be a professional speaker." He said, "Well, yeah, have you ever heard of Toastmasters?"
Yeah.
I said, "I heard of it, but I had no idea what it was." And he said, "It was a place where people meet to practice speaking. So you should probably try to find a meeting." And I looked it up. Toastmasters was everywhere. They had one in Miami Beach, South Beach, which was at the time I was living in Miami Beach. So I go to the next Toastmasters meeting in South Beach. And when you join the club, you give this little speech called the icebreaker. And it's like a 4 to 5 minute speech, 4 to 6 minutes, where you just introduce yourself. So I gave that speech. And in the speech, I say, same thing I told you. I've been playing pro basketball. I'm about to stop and I want to get into professional speaking. And I came here because someone told me that maybe this is the place that I should start. I don't know if this is the place, but I'm here. So this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There's about 10 people in the room. This is a pretty small meeting. So the meeting ends and this other guy comes up to me. He was the only other black guy in the room. He comes up to me and he says, "Well, hey, man, I love your speech. You have a natural speaking ability. But look, I'm getting out of sports as well." His sport was football. "And I want to be a professional speaker too." So just serendipitous. Now, I don't know who this guy is because football players wear the helmet, so you don't know their
Yeah.
faces. So he
Yeah.
tells me his name. I actually knew his name, but I did not know his face. So his name was Philip Buchanan. He had played at University
Yeah.
of Miami. He had been a defensive back in the NFL, all pro, serious player. But I didn't know his face. I didn't know his name though when he told me. So he said, "I'm going to this event is for like people who are speakers. They all go to these events. It's in San Diego." It was the National Speakers Association Conference. So he was going. He said, "When I go, anybody I meet, I'll pass you their info." I said, "All right, cool." He went, he passed me one person's info. This woman named Dawn in St. Louis. She lived in South Florida. I cold call her because Phil didn't really give me any information. I just called her. And I could see when I called her, she was at her computer. So she said, "You have a website?" Because apparently she had like hundreds of people had not from that time, but over her career, she
Yeah.
always had people who wanted to be speakers coming to her, like, "Can you help me out?"
Yeah.
So this is normal for her. Somebody calling, "I want to be a speaker," blah, blah, blah. So she's looking me up on her website. I could hear her clicking the mouse while I'm telling her my website, and she's looking around. And I could tell she was intrigued because I actually had something. I had a
Yeah,
website, I had a
right.
YouTube channel, I had books, I had something. Whereas a lot of people who came to her, I later found out, didn't really have anything, but they said they wanted to be a speaker. So we ended up meeting. We scheduled to meet for 30 minutes near her home at a Starbucks. 30-minute meeting became 3 hours. And it only became 3 hours because she noticed that I was taking notes on every single thing she said. Everything she said, I wrote down. And I still had
Yeah.
those notes to this day. So I was writing in Evernote. And I remember she would pause sometimes and say, "Is this useful for you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, keep going." And I would show her my notes. And she was like shocked at what I was writing down because she didn't even understand how valuable the stuff she was telling me was, because she later told me, like, "Dre, I've had that same meeting with so many different people and they all go and do nothing.
Yeah.
You took it and actually did something." So anyway, speeding up here, she's the one who told me, "All right, you're an athlete. Corporate loves athletes. Why? Because you understand leadership, you understand teamwork, you understand discipline, you understand performance, you understand confidence, you understand working under pressure. All the things athletes need, they need in corporate. So
Yeah.
if you can package this stuff up, you can be a speaker. You just got to package it up and put it into a format that they can understand why your experience is worth something."
Yep.
And this is where working on your game came from. So that's how I got into professional speaking.
I love it. Now, talk about that parlaying into the books. And once again, you've got 30
Yeah.
of them, over 30 of them. So we
Yeah.
won't have time to go through each of them, but maybe one or two, good principles
Yeah.
that, you talk about in your books that have been really profound for you and for your
Mm.
audience.
Sure. So I'll just tell you about two. So Work on Your Game is one
Yeah.
book. It's literally called Work on Your Game. And that
Yeah.
book came from, here's another thing. I went and did a speaking gig that I did not get paid for. It was in Atlanta, 2017. And I wasn't even going to do it because at this point, I'd done a lot of free speaking. And at that point, I decided, you know what? I'm not speaking anywhere. They won't pay me.
Yeah.
So I had a person doing applications on my behalf at this time, a woman named Marlene. And Marlene applied for me to speak at this event. And they chose me and they emailed me and said, "Congratulations, you've been chosen." So I reached out to the woman who sent the email and I said, "All right, thank you. Do you all have my fee?" And she said, "Well, we don't pay speakers." I said, "Well, I'm not doing it." And she replied back and said, "Mr. Baldwin, I strongly suggest you reconsider, because the kind of people we have in the audience at this event, I think it would be good for you, even though we can't pay you." And for
Mm,
whatever reason, I decided to listen to her. I go and do the gig. Now, from this one gig, I did a speech called Work on Your Game, How to Apply the Pro Athlete Mindset to Business, Sports, and Life. That was the name of the speech.
yeah.
I got booked by the NCAA, the NBA, and I got a book publishing deal from this free speech, one speech.
Yeah.
And one of those, the NBA, she came to me before I even spoke because she knew I was a basketball player. She gave me her information, said, "I can't even stay for your speech. Just
Yeah.
call me." And they ended up booking me. I spoke to every team in the G League the following season
How
based on that.
amazing.
And she didn't even hear my speech
Yeah.
because they just needed the right type of person. So then when I got off the stage after my speech, this woman from a publishing company in New York, McGraw-Hill, she came
Yeah.
up to me and said, "Well, Dre, have you ever thought about writing a book with a traditional publisher?" Because at this point, I had several self-published books. I said, "Yes." That speech that I just gave, I want to write a book about that. She said, "Call
Yeah.
me." That became that book right there, Work on Your Game,
Yes. Okay.
from that speech right there. So again, who knew that would happen, right? So again,
Yes.
just showing up is just the showing up mindset. Yeah, I think it's shown several times here. And the other one I'll tell you is my book, The Third Day. So in my book, Work on Your Game, that's where basically I encompass everything we talked about here for the last hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every other book is kind of like subtopics. So
Mhm.
the third day is a subtopic of discipline. It's
Mm.
about showing up and giving your best effort when you least feel like it. So you mentioned the person you interviewed. What was the person's name you said? How do they keep showing
Justin
up?
Prince. Yeah, Justin Prince.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what the third day is about.
Yeah.
How do you keep showing up when you don't feel like showing up? You're tired. You missed your last three sales calls. Your team lost the last three games. Yet it's cold outside. It's raining. You don't really feel like doing it, but you show up anyway.
Mm.
That's what makes the professional. That's what separates the professionals from the amateurs. And I realized that that was a big thing for me. And I went and wrote actually, one of my TEDx talks is called The Third Day. I did that TEDx talk in like 2015. I didn't write the book till 2021. But that's what the third day is all about. And there's a chapter in Work on Your Game called The Third Day. So when I tell you that every other book is a subtopic, that's what I mean. So the third day is just a breakout of that whole concept. And those are actually my two biggest keynotes. So when I give a keynote, I got one called Work on Your Game. I got another one called The Third Day. So there you go. I answered all your questions in one right there.
I love it. Well, Dre, I want to say thanks so much for sharing your story and just all the amazing things you've already done. And I'm excited to just continue the relationship. And 2 years from now, probably 4 books later, we'll have to do this again and just continue to highlight all the amazing things you're going to continue to do.
Absolutely. I got 4 bucks coming in the next 4 months, so it might be more than that, hopefully. I appreciate the opportunity, though. Thank you for sharing your platform.